Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in to the channel. In this video, I thought I would bring you my final mock draft of the year. As some of you may know, the NFL draft is happening in only 2 days. At the time of recording this, I plan to put this out on draft day. So, I suppose, without further ado, we should begin. So, as with my previous mock drafts, Caleb Williams is going number 1. I think this has become a very interesting sort of side story where Caleb Williams is barely getting any attention because we know that he's going number 1 overall, and we've known that basically since the Bears acquired the first overall pick, so what is there really to say? Now, at number 2 for the Washington Commanders is where I think the draft really begins. Now, in some of my previous mock drafts, I've been relatively critical of Jayden Daniels, and there is still some part of me that doesn't believe the smoke, doesn't believe the notion that Jayden Daniels is going number 2. However, I think that the current consensus is that Jayden Daniels will be the second selection, but I am going to stick with my gut, and I'm going to say that Drake Maye is going to be selected at number 2. Now, this is another very interesting situation where if this is how the draft unfolds, does someone come up to number 3 for a quarterback? Of course, the Patriots also need a quarterback, but I question whether or not the Patriots are in a situation where they want to take on more of a project QB like Jayden Daniels or JJ McCarthy instead of getting a Caleb Williams or a Drake Maye, who I believe are much more complete prospects and don't need the same kind of time to develop to become as good as I think, they could be in the NFL. But, that's entirely up to the Patriots to decide. And recently, I've started to ask the question on Twitter, does the Patriots situation really feel like one where they're trying to actively compete, right? Because you look at it, they bring in Jerod Mayo at head coach, and they bring Elliot Wolf as their de facto GM, who doesn't even hold the job title of GM. He is legitimately just the de facto GM, and it kind of seems like this is sort of a throwaway year for the Patriots. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but some of you might get what I'm trying to say there, but it feels like a really weird year for the Patriots. So, does someone come up and get a quarterback? I think there is a scenario where they're not super interested in Jayden Daniels, they're not super interested in JJ McCarthy, but in this specific scenario, I don't think there's going to be someone who wants to trade up 2-3 if Jayden Daniels and JJ McCarthy are the options. If it were JJ McCarthy or Drake Maye, I think someone like the Vikings down at 11 could go, hey, our guy is there, we gotta, go get it. But we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So, as it stands, I'm going to give Jayden Daniels to number 3. And then the number 4 pick is another pick that I think has been pretty set in stone for quite some time now. and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 4 to the Cardinals. Obviously, the Cardinals lost Rondale Moore. They lost Hollywood Brown in free agency. They have a rookie, well, not a rookie anymore, but they had a rookie last year, Michael Wilson, who sort of showed us that, maybe there's a little bit of something there, but maybe you want him as the number 2 guy, whatever. But the Arizona Cardinals have a lot of draft picks this year, and when I do my predictions at some point, it will be fun to look back at who they picked. Now, at number 5, this is where I do think, in the scenario that Drake May goes at number 2, this is where I think the Vikings come calling. And this is a new simulator, by the way. This is Pro Football Network. Before we were using Mock Draft Database, so I can't force trades on this, so we're gonna see if we can get something to go. Now, what would trade compensation look like? I think a lot of people sort of overvaluate these kind of things when it comes to trades. Obviously, depending on how hard they're moving up, it's going to cost more, but I think it will definitely cost less to go from 11 to 5 instead of 11 to 3. And there are also other factors that we could go on and on about, how the Vikings GM is good friends with Jim Harbaugh, my apologies. Jim Harbaugh, the new coach of the Chargers, coached J.J. McCarthy in college. Maybe he wants to help his college quarterback end up in a favorable situation, but, who knows? The important thing is here, we just need to make the Vikings get to 5, okay? So, I think at absolute minimum, it will take both firsts because they don't have a second or a third. If they had a second or a third, I think they could probably get away with keeping their first this year. But as it stands, I don't want to go too crazy with these trade predictions because obviously there is no possible way that anyone is going to be able to get the compensation right. It's just a matter of, can we get the simulator to do it? So let's try this first, and then, we'll see. Okay, there we go. So 11 and 23, which I think is the absolute bare minimum for the Vikings to move to 5. So this works out, as it's also the only 2 picks that are relevant to the mock draft. So at number 5, J.J. McCarthy, quarterback from Michigan, ends up on the Vikings. I am sold on the idea that the Vikings grade Drake May and J.J. McCarthy very similarly, and I think that's why they've sort of telegraphed how aggressive they want to get into the top 5 and get a quarterback, is because I think they may have a very similar grade on Drake May and J.J. McCarthy, maybe even Jaden Daniels too, but I know their meeting with Jaden Daniels has kind of been kind of a mess, right? Like they scheduled a meeting, it fell through, whatever, but I could very easily see this taking place. Now, number 6, I'm not sold on the idea that the Giants even want a quarterback this year. I know there may be some of you that are like, oh, well, if the Vikings are trading up to 5, why wouldn't the Giants just trade up to 5 to go and get a quarterback? And there are 2 things that I think about that. The first of which is that the Chargers need wide receiver, and the Giants also need wide receiver. And I don't think the Chargers would be willing to compete with the Giants for a wide receiver. Even if they were moving up specifically to get a quarterback, it could be a thing where the Giants say, sorry, we wanted to move up and get a different guy, right? So I don't think the Chargers would even entertain an offer from the Giants But that being said, right, if Malik Neighbors is at 5 and the Giants come calling and they're like, hey, we want a quarterback, we want a quarterback, we want a quarterback, I think that the Chargers just take the wide receiver and let the quarterback fall to 6, right? But if the Chargers are like, hey, we've got a lot of holes to fill, our roster is not what it used to be, there's plenty of talent for wide receiver later in the draft, maybe we go get an Odell Beckham or Michael Thomas in free agency, just fill the room, right? Just fill the wide receiver room. But, it's not something that we are ever going to know because we are not employed by the Chargers or the Vikings or the Cardinals, right? So we don't know the inner workings of what they're specifically looking for. But this has fallen favorably for the Giants and some of these other teams further down the board, in a way that the Giants finally get a number 1 wide receiver in New York for the first time since Odell Beckham. So this, to me, even if a quarterback falls to 6, like J.J. McCarthy, say, for instance, the Chargers don't find a favorable deal, they don't move down from 5, and they instead take Malik Neighbors. Even if J.J. McCarthy were here at 6, I do believe that the Giants would take Roma Dunes instead, or Roma Dunze. I think they would take the wide receiver instead, because even if they took a quarterback, he's not starting year 1, okay? And it's not like the Jordan Love situation, where Jordan Love is playing behind a future first ballot Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers and has been learning from him for 2-3 years. And it's not like the Patrick Mahomes situation either, where Patrick Mahomes also sat for a year, but he was learning from Andy Reid, right? So if you're a quarterback and you're drafted by the Giants and you give Daniel Jones $40 million, and yes, you can get out of the Daniel Jones contract like next year, what does that do to the room, to the locker room, if you have Daniel Jones being paid all this money and then suddenly, you bench him? What kind of environment is that going to make? So I just don't see it as very likely that they go and get a quarterback. I think they're just going to say, hey, we were wrong about Daniel Jones. We're going to ride it out. We're going to make a more favorable situation for this year and the next year following. And then we're either going to draft a quarterback or we're signing Dak Prescott, right? Because Dak Prescott, I am fully convinced, is going to walk in free agency next year. And I think if the Patriots don't draft quarterback this year, if they trade down with the Vikings or something and they miss out on quarterback, however it happens, I think the Patriots and the Giants would be like the 2 spots right away that would probably be in on Dak Prescott for 2-3 years. But that's a topic for a different time. Okay? So, anyways, with all of these tangents getting in the way of this, I think Malik Neighbors would be great for New York. I think Daniel Jones would be perfectly fine, right? If they give him Malik Neighbors, he'd probably put up the best season ever that he's had. Not the best season by a quarterback ever. I mean, for Daniel Jones standards. But I think Malik Neighbors is a great pick for the Giants, is what I'm trying to say. Number 7 is a pick that I'm also pretty confident about in this class. It is Joe Alt at number 7 to the Tennessee Titans. The only competition maybe for that is the Chargers at 11 for Joe Alt. But how realistic is it really, right? I think the Chargers just have too many holes. I think they're going to trade down with the Vikings and build the roster that way. So the Atlanta Falcons is one that is almost impossible for me to get. I think if any draft pick in the top 10 is going to be wrong, for me, it is going to be at number 8, because the Falcons could really go in any way that they want to. They have a couple of needs. Obviously, you can see them up here: edge, corner, wide receiver, D tackle, safety. And I think it would be really fun to explore a scenario that I haven't seen anyone really talk about, but one that I think is also really, really interesting, and that is the Falcons taking Rome Odunze at number 8 in this draft. Okay, and let me try to explain myself very briefly on why I think there is a distinct possibility of this happening. So, the Atlanta Falcons, obviously, they did some huge retooling in the offseason. They went and got Kirk Cousins. They signed Darnell Mooney. I'm trying to think who else is in that receiver room right now, because it's Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, who I don't really believe in much. Who's their other wide receiver? I know there's another guy in there. I can't really think of him off the top of my head. Let me check very briefly if I can find. I have found what I'm looking for. Rondale Moore. That's who I was trying to think of. They brought in Rondale Moore from the Arizona Cardinals. And I'm going to be honest, I think Rome Odunze is better than both of those guys right this very minute. So, I think there is like a quiet possibility. You know, just a sneaky little, they could do this. They could go, hey, we brought in these guys. They're not great. You know, Darnell Mooney, I liked him coming out. I liked him in his first year or two. He has some issues with route running, the drops, and Rondale Moore too, to a different extent. So I think if they got Rome Odunze, would really be them saying, hey, we can win not only this division, but we can go and make some noise in the playoffs, right? Because I think that's the whole point of the Atlanta Falcons bringing Kirk Cousins in, is just, hey, we are in win now mode, right? Because their defense is solid. Their O-line is underrated, right? I think there is an actual possibility that the Falcons get Rome Odunze, and I don't think I've seen anybody else really talk about it, which is kind of a shame, because I think it's very, very entertaining as a possibility to have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, all kinds of weapons in Atlanta. So that is my selection at number 8. It's a bit unconventional, but I hope I have convinced a few of you maybe of its possibility. Now, the Bears at 9 is another one that is pretty difficult to predict. But what I think is going to happen there, and, while they do need edge, they do need, I don't even know if they need wide receiver anymore, because they brought in Keenan Allen. Of course, Keenan Allen's only on a 1-year deal, and he is 33, I want to say, but, details, semantics, whatever. They also only have 4 picks in this draft. And let's take a grand old look here just for fun. They have 9, 75, and 122. I think there is a less than 0 chance. I'd say maybe like a 62% chance that the Bears trade down here. And of course, to trade down, you need to find a partner. And what will that partner be? I think it will either be the Indianapolis Colts or, let's take a look here, Seattle maybe? Yeah, either the Colts or Seattle, I think, are like the only real opportunities for them. especially if Roma Dunze goes at 8. I don't know that they're really sold on Brock Bowers in Chicago. They have 2 tight ends, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, who I don't think are anything special by any means, but they're serviceable. They're fine. They could take Brock Bowers for themselves, but I think there is also a distinct possibility that they trade down. And if I haven't made it clear already or in previous videos, I always root for what I believe is the most entertaining possibility. So in this hypothetical universe that you and I find ourselves in, I'm going to say they're giving up 9 for 15, 82, 191. I think that's decently fair value. Maybe they get like a 3rd next year or a 4th next year or something. We'll see if this goes through or not. That trade has been rejected. Okay, we'll try again. Chicago Bears, Indianapolis Colts, 9 for 15, 82, and a 2nd next year. Will that go through? That will not. See, this is the problem with trade simulators that don't let you force, because it's like, I don't know what model they're using for their trades, so it's like, it might not even let me, which is a shame, because I want it to be, it's my mock draft. I want the Colts to come up, but let's see here. If I do 9 and a 1st next year, just to make it go through, because I don't really care what the compensation actually is. I just want it to go through, and it looks like that's not actually going to happen. So we'll try one final time, because again, if the trade isn't going to be realistic, 9, 122, 15, 82, 191. Okay, so it's just not going to let us trade that pick, which is unfortunate. So in that instance, I think the Chicago Bears will probably more than likely go for a defensive player, and it will probably be an edge rusher. And I think it just comes down to preference, who you prefer out of the 3 of these. Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, or Jared Verse. I think Jared Verse is slightly bigger than Dallas Turner. Yeah, slightly bigger. Which I think is more in line with what Chicago looks for in an edge rusher. So I'm going to give them Jared Verse. I am deeply saddened that I couldn't get the Colts to come up to 9, but oh well. Now, at number 10, in this scenario where the Colts can't come up to number 9, I think Brock Bowers will go at number 10 to the Jets. And I believe this because the New York Jets need to get more options on their offense to not be so stagnant all the time. Obviously, some of that is because their quarterback situation has been probably the worst in the entire NFL. But, Aaron Rodgers is coming back, so hopefully that will alleviate that to some degree. I wouldn't hold my breath, but even if it does or does not, I think Brock Bowers would be a huge improvement for the Jets' offense, because we know their defense is good. Their defense is really good. Their offense has struggled. It's basically just Garrett Wilson. And if you get a proper second option in there, which I think you do that with Brock Bowers, I think that the offense becomes much more dynamic, and they probably sneak back into the playoffs. But again, that's a conversation for after the draft. We'll do a post-draft analysis together at some point, but again, that is for later. So for now, Brock Bowers at number 10. The Chargers are now up at number 11. And I believe they will probably be going for an offensive lineman. And again, like with the edge for the Chicago Bears, this just comes down to preference. I know that they desperately need a right tackle, I believe. Because Rashawn Slater, who isn't a tackle for the Chargers, I know is good or should be good. So I don't know who here is specifically a right tackle, but I do know that most tackles who come into the NFL start at right tackle or at one of the guard spots. So again, it probably just comes down to preference. I know Olu Fashanu has some medical concerns. I know that Troy Fautanu has recently risen up a lot of draft boards. And I know that Talise Fuaga is probably my favorite tackle in this class, so I will be giving the Chargers Talise Fuaga. Okay, the Broncos at number 12. I have seen far too many mock drafts that give the Broncos the 5th quarterback here at 12. 5 quarterbacks in the top 15. I don't think we're going to see at all. I think if I were to make a wager, which I suppose I am in this video, at number 12, I would suspect the Denver Broncos are looking defensively. Okay, they lost Justin Simmons. They lost another one of their players who I cannot think of off the top of my head, who got old. And just, they didn't re-sign. I do not know who he is. I can picture him in my head, but I can't think of his name. But I think they're definitely looking defensively. They could also, be a sneaky wide receiver team in the first. I don't really believe they will be, but, anything's possible. But as it stands, I think either Dallas Turner or Terrion Arnold, one of these Alabama guys, I think is going to be a future Bronco. They recently released their new uniforms, so maybe one of these young fellas here will be enticed by that. And I know in previous mock drafts I was always giving them Terrion Arnold's, but I think it would be very interesting if they ended up with Dallas Turner. I think that would be really cool, actually, if Dallas Turner ends up in Mile High. I think Dallas Turner is a real game changer. This draft class is not very strong defensively, and, they already have Patrick Surtain, who is a complete stud. Patrick Surtain is crazy good, and I think the corner class is stronger than the edge class, and I think edge is more important anyway. So I think Dallas Turner to the Broncos could be really cool. Next up at 13, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly of Oakland. And this is another team where I've seen far too many people give them the 5th or 6th quarterback in round 1, which is just absolutely insane, and I don't see it happening at all. So I'm not going to give them a quarterback. I think I'm going to give them an offensive tackle, which I believe I've done in all of my previous mock drafts. And I think most of the time it has been J.C. Latham. I really like J.C. Latham to the Raiders. I can't really explain why. I just do. Maybe it's because he just sounds like a Raider. I don't know. But this time around, I think I will give him Troy Fautanu. I think Troy Fautanu will end up in Vegas. New Orleans Saints, another team that need tackle quite badly. And I've sort of fallen into the idea of Olu Fashanu ending up in New Orleans. I've seen that a lot in recent mock drafts. To see Olu Fashanu being drafted by the Saints, maybe it's because he falls due to medical concerns. For whatever reason, a lot of people think he has the potential to be, first or second best tackle in this class. But again, those medical concerns are there, and the Saints desperately need help on both sides for both tackle positions. So I think Olu Fashanu does make sense for the Saints. At number 15, the Indianapolis Colts were not able to trade up to 9 to get Brock Bowers. If the board fell this way, I could see them trading down, but I don't think it's going to let me trade down, so I'm not even going to try. I wish I could see their depth chart, because I'm not super familiar with who's on the Colts. I don't think they're going to take Brian Thomas at 15. I think Brian Thomas is a good player, but I just don't think it's happening. Terrion Arnold, maybe. I think Terrion Arnold actually does kind of intrigue me as a Colt. I know. Well, I say I know, but I don't actually know if Kenny Moore is there anymore or if he's even good anymore. I know he was for like a year. So I think I'm going to give them Terrion Arnold. The Seahawks is another position where we could see some offensive line go. I think there's going to be a lot of offensive line picked in the first round this year, because pretty much every team in the league needs offensive line help at one of the positions, because there are 5 of them. This could also be where a corner goes. I think that's a little bit less likely now than I did in some of my previous videos. I also have had Laiatu Latu go to the Seahawks before. Could this be like a Byron Murphy? Maybe. I think this could be like Graham Barton, right? Like a Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson kind of thing. It's not the flashiest pick in the world, but I think it would help them a lot to improve that O-line. So I think I will, in fact, give them Jackson Powers Johnson. I like that. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they will go Quinyon Mitchell. Corner, at least, I do believe will be their selection. Now, I am of the belief that the Panthers need a lot more than other people think. Not the Panthers, sorry, the Jaguars. I'm not too enthused by that roster. I think it's Trevor Lawrence and then just a bunch of bench warmers, but what do I know? I do think Quinyon Mitchell would be a good fit for the Jaguars at the very least. I cannot think of the last time. Well, Jalen Ramsey, I think, is the last time the Jaguars had anyone notable in their secondary, and that was like 7 years ago at this point. So I think it would be good to get them somebody back there so that Trevor Lawrence doesn't have to do all the work every single game. Now we are on to the Cincinnati Bengals at number 18. And the further down the list we go, the less sure I am about the picks being made. I don't think edge is really on the table for them. Offensive tackle definitely could be. Offensive tackle isn't the flashiest pick in the world, but I do believe there are going to be so many offensive linemen that go in round 1 this year. It also says their number 1 need is defensive tackle. I know they got rid of DJ Reader, who was very good. I don't remember who they brought in. Of course, I am a fan of Texas. I do like the Longhorns. And I do like Byron Murphy. And I think he could succeed quite well in Cincinnati. So I'm going to give Byron Murphy II to the Cincinnati Bengals. And at number 19, I'm going to give them Cooper DeJean. I think Cooper DeJean is going to end up in Los Angeles. Now, over here on NFL Football, or Pro Football Network, They do have him listed at safety, but he can play both safety and corner. And he's a ridiculous athlete. So I think with the kind of utter nonsense that they do in the Rams' defensive scheme, I think they could use him very, very well. I think they could use a lot of his athleticism, his ability to just do some crazy stuff with his skill set. Move him to the nickel, move him outside, wherever, whatever. Very, very interesting prospect for sure, and I would love to see him in LA. And at number 20, this is like from 20 to 25. If the Chargers didn't go tackle up at 11, I think 20 to 25 could all be offensive line. I really do. In the real draft. Maybe not so much the Eagles, but everybody else. I think this could all be offensive line. So I'm going to take a look real fast at what that looks like for... Yeah, I think it could. In light of that, I'm going to say that the Steelers end up with J.C. Latham. The Miami Dolphins end up with, where is he? Maybe not Zach Frazier this early, but Tyler Guyton, perhaps Jordan Morgan even. I'm going to say Tyler Guyton. Number 22 to the Eagles. Maybe not so much offensive line, but like kind of a little bit, just a little tiny bit. In this instance, I think I am going to give them actually, Kool-Aid McKinstry just sounds like an Eagle, and I keep giving him to the Eagles like all the time. At 22, I give Kool-Aid McKinstry to the Eagles. I think it could be nice. They desperately need secondary help in Philly. It is Darius Slay and nobody else right now. Obviously, they have people rostered, but how good are they really? Not very. And I had, in my previous mock draft, one of them, I had somebody comment something to the effect of, why would the Eagles ever draft a corner? He would be like the fifth corner on their roster. And it's like, I don't know if you and I watched the same team in the playoffs last year, because their secondary was the reason they lost that game. They couldn't stop a fly from coming through. So I think secondary is a huge need for the Eagles. So Kool-Aid McKinstry makes a lot of sense. And the board, the way it is fallen right now, the LA Chargers are sipping champagne because Brian Thomas Jr., another very solid wide receiver prospect, number 4 on the board here, just falls right in their lap. So I think they are very comfortable walking away with Brian Thomas Jr. and Talise Fuaga, or Olu Fashanu, or Tyler Guyton, or whoever this happens to be at 11 for offensive tackle, because I do believe their first pick will be offensive tackle if they decide to trade off of 5. If the Patriots were to trade off of 3 and end up at 11, I think it would also be offensive tackle, wide receiver, in a very similar look to this. So, hopefully I get at least some of the numbers right on these players, their draft position, not necessarily their team. That would be pretty cool. Anyways, we are almost through here. At number 24, the Dallas Cowboys. This is another team that I'm not super familiar with. I don't really watch the Cowboys too much. I'm not sure why. They're on national TV all the time, but I usually skip those games. I think it will probably be an offensive lineman, whether that's Amarius Mims or Graham Barton or, whoever. I don't think it'll be Kingsley Suamataia. It could be Jordan Morgan, but Amarius Mims is right there. I think they walk away with that pretty happy. The Green Bay Packers at 25, I think, are a pretty significant trade down candidate. Like, the Packers at 25, the Bucks at 26, the Bills at 28, and the Lions at 29, and maybe even the Ravens at 30, I think are definitely teams that could move down if somebody wants to come up and draft Michael Penix or Bo Nix for the fifth-year option. I think it's around this sort of range that could happen, because I'm not so sure that the let me just check what the Packers have. The Packers actually have quite a few picks. I did not know that until just now. That is a lot of picks in the top 100. Very interesting, but as it stands, we have to play this off of how the board has fallen. And this situation, I think, maybe if it fell close to this, where they don't get an offensive tackle, I don't know that they would specifically go for guard or center just yet. I have no doubt they will later. But if it fell this way, maybe I'm off on their trade down likelihood if it fell this way, and maybe they just go Nate Wiggins, who is also a ridiculous athlete. Not the biggest corner in the world, but, you can put on some weight. But I like Nate Wiggins a lot. I think the Packers desperately need another secondary corner behind Jair, especially because, if rumors are to be believed, it sounds like Jair might not be too interested in playing in Green Bay too much longer, so I think some help would be greatly appreciated in the scenario where he does move off the team, right? So I think Nate Wiggins is good. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Laiatu Latu is just sitting there, and Laiatu Latu, I think, is a very gifted athlete, is a very good player, has the potential to be very, very, very good in the NFL, but what we have to remember is that medicals will seriously tank a draft stock. Like, more than anything else, medicals will knock you down the board. We've seen off the field stuff with a guy like Laramie Tunsil, or I don't know if the defensive tackle that the Eagles just took last year, I don't remember where they drafted him at, but I don't know if that really counts as falling due to off the field stuff. Maybe it does. Jalen Carter, that's his name. I think he still went like top 10, but regardless, off the field stuff is nothing compared to medicals, and Laiatu Latu had to medically retire from football in college. Obviously he was cleared again later. He came back, had some good seasons, or season, I can't quite remember, but I think Laiatu Latu will fall a lot farther than people are thinking, maybe even farther than this, but he's looking the Buccaneers right in the mouth, and I think he would do wonders in Tampa. The Cardinals, I already know. I have a very solid feeling that they are going to take either of the two defensive tackles that I think will go in round one, which is Byron Murphy II and Jerzon Newton. Whoever doesn't go before them is who they're taking at 27. I am very convinced of that. I think they've needed a defensive tackle for a very, very long time. Obviously, Johnny Newton's not the biggest by any means, but Johnny Newton is a hell of a player. Johnny Newton has all kinds of hustle. He's when you watch him, it is ridiculous to see what he does. Okay, I had to make a cut there. Sorry. As I was explaining before, Johnny Newton, to the Arizona Cardinals at 27. I think he's a heck of a player, high motor, all that kind of speak. And I definitely believe that whoever doesn't get taken first of the two defensive tackles will end up in Arizona. And moving on to number 28, the Buffalo Bills. I think they seriously could be a trade down candidate here. I'm not sure they're like super high on any of the wide receivers left. I don't think Chopper Robinson really moves the needle for them. Same with Tyler Newman, I don't think would be the guy. But where it currently stands, I'm not sure that I could make a deal work. We're going to try. And I'm going to say that the Las Vegas Raiders give the Buffalo Bills a call and say, hey, we'd like to come back into the first, if you don't mind. There he is. So, 44, 77, 208 for 28, and like 200. Again, the trade compensation, I'm not saying this is exactly what'll happen, obviously. This is just to see if it works, and it doesn't. I for some reason, when I use this simulator, the only trade I am ever able to get successfully every time is the Vikings. That's it. And it's always with their 2 firsts. That is the only trade I can ever get done. So I don't know what model they use, but, you know, it's just something we have to deal with, I suppose. We can try one more time. 44, 112, 208 for 28, 200. Okay, so it's just not going to let us do it. In that case, I am going to make a bit of a unconventional selection for the Bills at number 28, and that is wide receiver Troy Franklin from Oregon. I think he's just a better version of Adonai Mitchell, just a more productive Adonai Mitchell. So that's why I think Troy Franklin ends up on the Bills. And partly because as an Adonai Mitchell fan, as a Texas fan, there's one team that I want him to go to. There's one team that I think he will have the most possible success on. And we'll get to that in just a minute. The Detroit Lions, I think, again, are another candidate to possibly trade down and let somebody come up for like a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix. But we all know that's not going to let us do that. So in this scenario, I'm going to give them a corner. And I am going to give them Ennis Rakestraw Jr., who I am a big fan of. I think I don't think the consensus agrees with me on Ennis Rakestraw Jr., but I really like the guy. I think he's a heck of a player. I think the Detroit Lions are like in a similar situation to the Eagles, where it's like secondary is clearly their biggest weakness. So I think that works out well for them. Again, the Ravens, I think, are a trade down candidate. But in this specific scenario, if they don't trade down, I think they're definitely either going to go for some O-line help or, yeah, probably just like a Graham Barton, right? Something like that. And that makes the 49ers very upset to see, somebody they're probably looking to grab for themselves go the pick before them. I don't think they're going to go corner. Again, I would really love to trade down for them right now with the way the board is. But as it currently stands, let's say they want Jordan Morgan, maybe. I think that could work. And finally, For my last pick, as has been my last pick, and I think all of my mock drafts, I'm giving the Kansas City Chiefs Adonai Mitchell, because I think that would just be perfect for him and for the Chiefs. I think Adonai Mitchell is not a perfect prospect by any means. I think there are some serious questions about his ability to separate at the NFL level, to really produce the way you would want to at the NFL level. But the important thing to remember about the Chiefs is that they have Travis Kelce. So he does not need to be any kind of, superstar right away. He can just sort of be a very productive, hopefully, second option for the Chiefs, which I think would be wonderful for him and his career. So I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, well, you know what to do. So, I thank you once again for watching. I will speak with you all again soon, and goodbye for now.